So this topic is actually very close to my heart. And I normally don't talk about the story, but the first time I realized the joy of going beyond oneself, when you really, I would like to talk of two incidents to start off the discussion. One is my own personal life-changing crucible moment for me, and the other is a person whom I got to know and then get in touch and whom I revere and respect a lot, who lives in the Mangalore area. I'll talk about him a little later. First about my story. As a young man of 18, 19, just getting posted to the medicine department as a medical student. On one side was this inspiration from Vivekananda wanting to change the world, and I thought that I'll be the next Albert Schweitzer and I'll possibly go there and do something remarkable. And other side was the reality of working in a government hospital, very resource-limited settings. And in these circumstances, one day, and as a young medical student, you're always wanting to be early because, many of you might have children who are either doctors or becoming doctors, or some of you might have family members. In a government medical setup, typically the head of the department is king of his unit. And in my time, 40 years ago, when we were doing our medicine, virtually your becoming a doctor was completely in the hands of your professor, because more than 50% of the marks was in his hands. And if he decided to fail you, you're finished. We're all constantly nervous and tense and worried about the professor not liking you and taking it out of you. And this was a very angry professor in whose department I was posted. And, and he was a very popular man, popular doctor. So everybody would like to work with him and learn from him. So you have a professor, you have an assistant professor, you have 3 other lecturers, then you have 5 or 6 PG students, then you have the final year students, the 4th year students, and then finally the 3rd year students. That was me. So 20, 24 people. And one side of me is burning with the passion of wanting to do something different. And there was a patient who was actually diagnosed as hypertensive. All kinds of treatment given to him, he was not responding to treatment. And one day, every time the professor would come in the morning rounds and he would put his stethoscope, do all this, and then talk, check the ECG, check the X-ray, write a prescription, tell the nurse, give the prescription to the family members, and walk away. This repeated for 40 days. 41st day, and we, any third year medical student would always rush in early because we want the patients to think we are the doctors. Otherwise, we are nobody in the pecking order. But we want to pretend we are doctors, and so we try to show off. That's the only affirmation you can get as a third year student. And so I had gone there early, and the bed was empty. And in government hospitals, if the bed is empty, it means the patient died in the middle of the night. And the bed has been sent, the cot was empty, sorry. The bed has been sent for fumigation, and the patient's body is in the mortuary for the family to shift. And that is when I noticed the elderly lady weeping quietly, sobbing quietly. She must have been 70, 75. The old plastic basket. Nowadays, you don't get those plastic knitted basket. And few aluminium vessels she was packing into the bag. She was in distress. And I started talking to her, and I connected her to the patient. But just understand, after 40 days of going there every day, I had not recognized her as the mother of the patient who had just died. So this young man, I can't call him man, this patient was a 44-year-old cook from a nearby village in Tinasipur Taluk of Mysore, who was diagnosed as malignant hypertension. And in medically, we call it idiopathic malignant hypertension, which just essentially means we don't know the reason for the hypertension. And malignant, we say because it's not responding to treatment. And so it's not coming down at all. The patient had died because of that. And I was trying to explain to the mother, telling her that, we tried our best. We gave all kinds of medicines. The patient didn't respond, so we're very sorry. But being the first doctor that she saw, she let out all her grief, anger, all the venomous expletives that she could combine in her little, despite the sorrow, at me and said, you people killed my son and all those kind of things. I was very sad for her and said, no, the doctors gave everything possible. The medicines were not working on your son. And at that moment, she cried out and said, what medicines did you give? What you people gave are pieces of paper. Where are the medicines? And all we were doing was prescriptions, and not a single person in the 24-member retinue which followed the head of the unit ever even bother to find out if the patient is actually taking the medicine. What the patient had died of was not idiopathic malignant hypertension. What he had died of was untreated hypertension. And a patient in a government hospital had no source of medicines. The government was not supplying. And they had half an acre of land which they had sold. He was an unmarried man, elderly widowed mother. Now, she had lost her source of emotional support. She had lost her source of financial support, and she was crying. And that is when she burst out, I don't even have the money to take my son's body home. That incident was so powerful, it left me with a lot of questions. I even thought of dropping out of medicine because I thought this is not what I signed up for. I wanted to serve, and this is how do I serve in such a setting? But then, Vivekananda being Vivekananda and inspiration being so strong, he talks about you making your own destiny. And I thought my destiny at that time is to work for such people. But the story doesn't stop here. I went around and there was and to shift the body to a village, you needed a taxi. Those days, the old ambassador car. Many of you young people may not even know how an ambassador car looks like. But the little box, the big box. So I went to a taxi stand in Mysore. And I remember those days it was beside the Jatka stand. We used to have Mysore Jatkas, the horse-driven carriage and then the taxis. And an elderly Muslim gentleman who was a taxi driver agreed to come. But he told me the cost would be 200 rupees. In those days, I'm talking about 1980. It must have been 1980, early 84, very long time ago, 36, 37 years ago. And he said, that's what it costs. I said, I was shocked. I was a young student from a typical middle class family. My father would send me every month 250 rupees. So if I give 200 to this fellow, I can't afford to even live that month. So I bargained and finally arrived at 180 or something. And then he said, I asked him, why do you need so much of money? He said, the actual cost is 80 rupees. But I need 100 rupees because it's a dead body. I have to service my car and clean it up, otherwise nobody else will travel in the car. So he agreed and I brought him. Now I didn't have a rupee with me. And that is when it suddenly hit me. In all my enthusiasm, I brought a taxi to take the body. And then it struck me that this elderly woman also doesn't have any money with her. How do we pay the taxi driver? So I went around in the ward, all poor people. And that's the first time I realized it is the poor who understand poverty best. Now you and I can talk about poverty, we can debate it, discuss it. We'll never relate to it because we never experienced it. If I were to ask you, the audience of more than 260 people, how many of you have gone days without food? How many of you ever thought about the fact that 3 days later you may not have any food to eat? How many of us have really gone through that? It's very rare that any of you might have. You might have possibly tipped a meal here or there while you're working, but the sheer fact that you don't have the money to buy food or your family doesn't have the money to support you, it's very rare that at least in this group of people. I'm assuming that. But, and 2 rupees, 1 rupee, 5 rupees, people gave me and I could mobilize some of 100 rupees. They're still 80 rupees short. So I went to the driver, apologized to him and said, I'm sorry I brought you here. This is the reason. I only have 100 rupees with me. And I am a young medical student. I told him very honestly, my father sends me 250 rupees. I gave him my hostel room number. And I told him, I can only promise you this. I cannot pay you 80 rupees in one stroke. But every month I will give you 20 rupees. I'll come to your taxi stand and give you 20 rupees. I will somehow save 20 rupees a month. Come and pay it you in 4 months. Because I'm not able to pay you in one stroke, I'll pay you 5 months. I'll pay 20 rupees more. I'll pay 100 rupees. The taxi driver was, I don't know what happened. He said, I will take the body and go. And he was very nice. He took the body and went. And the next month when I went to 20 rupees to give it to the taxi driver, he looked at me and said, many times I have driven my taxi for myself, for my family, for my needs. Only that day, I drove the taxi for somebody else. That is when I felt so fulfilled. When I was doing it for my living, I never thought I'll be happy. I always thought I'm doing it to be happy, but I never felt happy. But the day, grudgingly, I did it for somebody else, knowing I thought you'll never even come back now. But in my mind, I said, I got 20 rupees more than normal, it is okay. I'll clean the car myself. But now I realize I don't need you to give me the money because what you gave me was something much beyond what money can give me. You gave me a meaning to my life, he said. This elderly Muslim taxi driver telling me, आपने मुझे जीवन का अर्थ समझाया. That's the exact word he said. I never understood anything. I was 17, 18 years old. I thought, what is this man is refusing my money? And at least one side I thought, oh, thank God, I saved 80 rupees now. And I came back. But to start off with the story, because what he said was a lesson for me. And Vivekananda says it in so beautiful words. He writes a letter to the Maharaja of Mysore. And in that letter he says, oh king, he's writing to a king who supported him to go to America. He writes to him, the vanities of life are transient, but he alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive. Look at the power of the statement of Swami. The vanity of life are transient. Vanities of life are transient, but he alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive. Swami Vivekananda said this, but this elderly Muslim taxi driver lived it. He showed me that life, when he lived for others, was real life. So from that day, he started living. And this incident teaches me that I should never forget living. And so this topic is not just about going beyond yourself. If I were to rename this topic, I will say, learning to live your life. Learning to live with self. Because still now many of you might have just carried on with life. You would have studied, you would have grown up, you would have got educated. You would have got a good degree, got a great job. You've been doing wonderful in your career, succeeding in everything you do, possibly building up a great reputation for yourself, very good in performance, getting all the good employee awards, everything. But deep down, you have to stop and ask yourself, is this what you were born for? This is life. This is what gives you meaning to life. What gives you meaning? Is there something higher that you must desire? Something bigger than yourself? And that can happen only when you start seeking things beyond yourself. Beyond yourself doesn't mean outside of yourself. There's a big confusion here. Beyond doesn't mean outside. Beyond just means it could be deep within or outside too. So it's beyond what you traditionally associate as yourself. And that is what I would like to spend the next several minutes talking about. After I share another story, which reinforced to me that these are the kind of people who are special. These are the kind of people who may never get known. In fact, only this year this person got known. In 2000, I remember a friend of mine was the editor of a Kannada daily. And I convinced him to write about this man as the man of the year kind of thing, front page. He wrote it. That's how the world got to know about him. Now, he is at that time, it was a 60, 65-year-old, another Muslim gentleman. His name was, we used to call him Appaji Sahib. In Mangalore, there's a place called Hampankatta, close by. He used to sell orange, Kitlehannu. Every morning he would come there with a basket of fruits. Every evening he would go back to his village after selling. Now this man, I got to meet him accidentally, got to know him. He made a commitment in his life some 50, 60, 70 years ago, around the independence, just after independence, or maybe 15, 20 years after independence. His commitment to life, he said, was 10% of all my sales, not my profits. See, today we talk about Bill Gates giving away his wealth, Azim Premji donating all his. They're all great people. I have nothing but admiration for them. It takes courage to give away everything. You take off Infosys or other big organizations giving away so much, and we say, oh my God, they're giving so much. But that giving is definitely giving. But I think when compared to Appaja Sahib, it's a different story altogether. Now, Appa Sahib, what he did, he told a commitment that 10% of my sales, not my profit. If he sells 100 rupees of oranges, he would take 10 rupees and keep it aside in a box in his house. Every day kept on taking money outside and built a small school in his village. Today it's a big school when he built it. And his reason to build the school was simple. I gone to the school and I asked him, why did you build? What do you get from it? And he told me his story. He had 8 children. He couldn't study. He couldn't educate his children. He said, I didn't have money to send my children to school because they had to take a bus and go to the next village, which I didn't have money for bus charge. So all my children are illiterate as much as I am illiterate. And I felt so angry with myself. And I said, I need to do something beyond myself. I, as a man, am incapable of educating my own children, but I need to go beyond them also. And how do I do it? He said, I had no idea. I then suddenly thought I will build a school. Because my children have to go by bus to another village, they are not able to access education. I will build a school in my village. And building a school is not easy. But he decided that and said, I don't have money to build it. His wife told him, don't be silly. We don't have money. We are very poor people. We don't have money to build a house. Where can you build a school? He said, no, house is irrelevant. I'm going to build a school. That day he started keeping away 10% of his earnings. For 25, 30 years he saved and finally built a 4-classroom school. And children from this village were attended. Gradually, more and more children came. He went to the government, convinced them to depute teachers. It became a primary school. It became a high school. And when it got to become a high school, he had no money. So the second or third time I went to meet him, I found him selling plantains. He must have been 80, 75 to 80 at that time when I went the next time. The third or fourth time, I don't remember. And I found him in a plaster of Paris cast on his leg. I asked him, what happened? Why are you in a cast? He said, I broke my leg. I said, what happened? And why are you still selling oranges? Your children are well off, your grandchildren are well off. Why are you simply doing this? He said, no. I brought all the school children till 7th standard. Now I feel obligated that they should go to a high school. So the only way I thought they can go to a high school, I asked the government to build one. They said, no, you build the building, we'll put teachers. Without even thinking about it. So he said, I had to build the building. 8, 9, 10, 3 classrooms. There's no money. So I started building, I started building. And then I saw there's 1 lakh rupee short. I borrowed 1 lakh. Remember, look at the commitment. Paying interest, he borrows 1 lakh rupee, builds the school. And then I told him, why don't you go collect from your children and others? He said, no, I borrowed the money. I must repay the loan. And that's why I started to sell oranges again. And I was standing on the building, fueling the building. I slipped and fell. I broke my leg. But my commitment to sell oranges and pay back the loan is mine alone and not my children's. And so I'm selling mine. And she come back to the market now to sell oranges. Well, isn't that living beyond yourself? People like them are living gods, in my opinion. They teach us that real life is living beyond yourself. This year, thankfully, after so many years, the government of India recognized Appaji Sahib and gave him the Padma Shri this year. Many of us told the government that he existed. But the fact is, extraordinary people are there in our midst. The bigger fact is, extraordinariness is hidden inside each one of us. Every one of you is extraordinary. The problem is, we don't remind ourselves of this extraordinariness. From morning to evening, we convince ourselves of our ordinariness. And that is the problem. I keep joking with my students. You stand in front of a mirror and you say, I can't see my image. You're very sorry that you can't see your image. The problem is the mirror is covered with dust. It requires an effort to wipe the dust and then you see your image, your bright, brilliant image of yourself. But who is to wipe the dust? We complain, criticize, wait for somebody else to come and wipe the dust. Oh, my manager is not okay. My CEO is not okay. This government is not okay. My MLA is a crook. My MP does not work. My Prime Minister is useless. We have all the excuses in the world because we want somebody else to come and wipe the dust. But the fact is, the self has to look beyond itself to understand its own capacity. You have to make the effort to wipe the dust in front of you to understand your true potential. And like Gandhi says, you will only understand yourself when you go beyond yourself to serve others. It's only in the service of others. Losing yourself in the service of others is the only way of finding you. That's what he says. That is what is going beyond ourselves. Going beyond the self to discover the self means living your life like Appaji Sahib for others at extraordinary cost. That is the beauty. Or like this elderly taxi driver who taught me, joy is not in living for myself, but there's a greater joy when I started living for others. And that's the message of all our scriptures of people like Swami Vivekananda. But it's very nice. It's very nice telling people they should serve. Everybody loves to say, I'm serving. I remember many years ago, I was traveling by train from Bangalore to Mysore. And generally in the train, people start talking to you and they ask me, what do you do? It's a very difficult answer for me. What do I do for a living? Because people expect that once you educate yourself and you are grown up, you must do something for a living. How do you explain to somebody, I'm a doctor, but I don't take salary, I don't charge anybody, I don't make any money? It's very difficult. So I would simply tell people, I'm in the business of social service. So I would simply say social service ke samadhan. So I'm doing social service. And people would find it very difficult. And sometimes people would criticize me and say, oh, everybody says that, every politician says he's serving society. Tell me what you do for a living. And that's a big challenge for many of us. We think living and life is about earning money. So earning money is not wrong. Don't get me wrong. Without money, we can't live. I need money to buy my clothes, to buy my phone, to put petrol for my vehicle. All of us need it. It's a transactional tool which every one of us needs. But is this what we're living for? Or are we living for something else? So discovering a true purpose, discovering why are we born and what are we to do with this life is the first step of going beyond yourself. Many of us forget that first step. All our life we are working. We retire without even knowing why we lived it. I've met so many people, extraordinary achievers, great things in life, but deep down there's a restlessness they can't understand or explain. Somewhere they feel empty, they feel incomplete. They don't feel that they are fulfilled in their lives. They feel that something is missing, but they don't know what that something is. That restlessness is possibly a signal to each one of you, if any of you have that restlessness. Sometimes the busyness of life doesn't permit us to step back and think about it. With the COVID crisis, a lot of people are in touch with me now, and many people I mentor and talk to. Now they're suddenly discovering the emptiness. And I tell them that emptiness is because, it's not because they're worthless or they don't have a job to do or they don't have enough money to earn. There's something when you step back in your life and start thinking about, I have lived my life 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. What have I actually done? What have I done for myself? People can explain and say, well, I earned a degree, I started a company, I bought 3 cars, I built 2 houses, I got my daughter married, all these things you can say. But that doesn't satisfy that inner emptiness. But a person who can get up and say, well, I did something for somebody else, he will not have this emptiness. He will suddenly feel very fulfilled. And the more you discover joy in giving of yourself, the more life is meaningful to that. So discovering this true purpose, and how strong should your purpose be? How passionate should you be about it? Is it just a fleeting purpose? Today I feel passionate about a poor child standing in the footpath, not able to go to school, or a beggar at the signal light comes to me for money. I feel very passionate and feel sorry for her and give 5 rupees and then say, oh, it's very fulfilling. Is that enough? Or something deeper, long drawn? How strong should your passion be for this journey of going beyond yourself? It's a beautiful story. A famous story which Ramakrishna Paramahamsa repeats. He says, two people are, one elderly sannyasi and his young disciple are walking along the ocean, river, the beach. And there's two Buddhist monks. And this young Buddhist monk is looking at his guru and saying, please tell me, what should I do to realize myself? What should I do to understand God? When will I realize God? Please tell me, what tapasya should I do? How long should I do? 10 years, 20 years? When will I see God? All of us are in this phase. We're all living a transactional life. If I do this for 5 years, I'll get this result. If I do this for 10 years, I will have this happening to me. So we don't understand how to inspire ourselves when we don't have an end goal in sight. If I simply tell people, do this because you will feel better, people are not happy with that. They need to know, how long should I do? How much better will I feel? After 3 days, how much better? 5 days, how much better? So this monk was like that. This elderly monk told him, never answered. He kept on pestering, he kept quiet. Suddenly the man got very tired. He said, come on, I will tell you when you can see God. How can you know God? He takes him into the ocean and suddenly pushes him into the water. Forces him into the water. Very nearly drowning him into the water. He holds his head under the water. The fellow is unable to breathe. And finally the fellow screams and says, Guru, you will kill me, I will die. And he keeps him underneath. He doesn't remove him. And just when he's about to die, he pulls him out and says, how did you feel when you were under the water? And what were your thoughts at that time? He said, My only thought was I needed air to breathe. Why is my Guru doing this? Please, I need to live. Just get my only thought was I had to live and I had to breathe, I had to come out of the water. And then the Guru says, when you become passionate with the same intensity about your desire to know God, that is when you will know God. It can be tomorrow, it can be 15 years later, it can never happen in this lifetime. That is the degree of passion we need to show to go beyond ourselves. Going beyond ourselves is not going into a school and distributing 10 notes. It is not about sitting in a slum and saying, I'm running a school for some children. It is an activity where you passionately go seeking something which you have no milestones to record, no end journey inside, but giving yourself 100% to what you do with a sincere belief that going beyond myself itself is my passion, my purpose of life. No, that's not a very easy thing to do, especially people ask me, I have a family to run, I have a company to go to, how can I do all that? So people misunderstand. Life is not about a job. That is just a role you play, a role of being a CEO of a company or head of a company or a manager in a company or an employee in a company. It's one role you're fulfilling for having been born. That is not the purpose of life. So don't misunderstand and say being a CEO is purpose of life. It's a role you play. Play it very well. Do a very good job. You deserve to do a good job. For that role, you will be rewarded. You may get a good salary, you may get a car. That's a role. You're a husband or a wife, you have a role to play, do a 100% job. You're a mother or a father, a brother or a sister, they're all roles. You're destined to, you're born into those roles or you acquire those roles, do a good job. But passionate reason for your existence is completely different. You can do all these roles and still fulfill that role. And that is what you need to discover. And that you can begin by dedicating your life in the service of others, in the pursuit of service. And this is where Swami Vivekananda says, very simplistically he says, 3 levels of service begin. In your journey of going beyond yourself, in your journey of discovering yourself to the service of others, he says a simple way to start. He gives a very beautiful procedure, I can say. First thing he says is, just look at others, beyond yourself, look at the bodies of others, other people, physical existence of others around you. And in that physicality of existence, take care of the deficits of that physicality. It is like physical service for Vivekananda meant building old age homes, anathalayas, orphanages, hospitals. And at one point of time, I thought that is my life, just building hospitals for rural India. I started off that way. And I thought I understood Vivekananda. He said, physical service, I'm serving all the physical people. Then Swamiji says, after some time, the restlessness comes back. And then you understand that you have to evolve, you have to go further. That means your beyond yourself has got a little more beyond. The goalpost has moved. Next goalpost is intellectual service. Bhautika seva, he says. From Daihika seva, he moves on to Bhautika seva. Bhautika seva is about intellectual service, cognitive service. So the schools we build, the awareness we create, the information we spread, all this is the next level, taking care of the mind and the brain. After some time, the hunger returns and you feel, oh my God, I've done this, what more beyond this? And that is when Swamiji says, Adhyatmika Seva, spiritual service. Well, that's a very big statement. We giving ourselves to others in the pursuit of spirituality as a service is not easy to accomplish. I can tell you this much, my friends, from my experience, I don't know whether I have the capability or the competence to offer any spiritual service to anybody. But what I learned is when you do the first two, the physical service and the cognitive intellectual service, with no consideration for yourself, with absolutely no selfish intent, completely unconditional, without any expectation, no expectation of a reward, award, recognition, people will write in the newspaper, nothing. When you give of yourself selflessly to the other, without your own knowledge, you grow spiritually. But that is when I realized spiritual service is not about giving it to others. It is about spiritually serving yourself. Enormous spiritual service you do to yourself and the powerful evolution that happens to you. But there's a pitfall in this, because in giving of ourselves to others, sometimes many of us lose our way. We think I'm doing so much for others, I must be a great man. And I can tell you from my personal experience, it's very painful for me to even say this. 10 years of doing this, 20 years of doing this, everybody started recognizing me, writing about me, newspapers, television, everything starts coming. slowly you forget going beyond yourself and you start thinking that I'm doing all this because I am doing it. It comes back to the self again. And that is a danger. That is not beyond yourself. It is drowning into yourself in a very, very negative way of looking at it. I also started going through that. You start thinking, oh, I built a hospital, I built a school, thousands of people are benefiting by me. I'm really serving everybody. The worst part was the then Chief Minister of Karnataka, Mr. Veerappa Moily, wrote my biography. It's a book called Kotta, where he wrote about me and all that many years ago. I thought, oh, I must be great. The Chief Minister is writing my story. I'm not ordinary. That is where Swami Vivekananda says it so beautifully. The real beyond yourself is doing it without even having the consideration of the self. That is when you are going beyond yourself. He says it so beautifully. He says, don't stand on a pedestal and say, here, my poor man, take my 5 cents. I'm giving beyond myself. I'm giving to him. He says, not that. Don't consider yourself great that you're helping the poor man, but consider yourself fortunate and privileged that there's a poor man to receive your help. Look at the thinking. It is not about the help, but it's an opportunity for you to recognize yourself and evolve yourself because the poor man has made himself available. It is not you helping him, but he is actually helping you evolve. And so he writes it so beautifully. The sentence, I thought he wrote it for me. He says, all the hospitals you build, exact words of his, all the schools you construct can collapse in one earthquake or can be reduced to a pile of dust in one cyclone, can get washed away in one flood. But remember, you are not the doer. Things are getting done through you. So really understanding going beyond the self, giving up ourselves beyond the self is dissolving the self in the service itself. Dissolving the very identity of who I am. I am Vinay, I am Srinath, I am Dr. Balasubramanian. Dissolving this very identity in this act of going beyond ourselves and giving up ourselves as an instrument of change, as something much beyond ourselves, in the sense and spirit of self-surrender to that larger force that guides and takes us to wherever life takes us. I think that is in reality going beyond ourselves. I think every one of us has this opportunity. How do you do it? By doing whatever you do very well. Whichever role you play, giving your 100% to the role, dissolving an identity of achievement, dissolving the identity of saying, I did this, dissolving the identity of saying, without me, this would not have got done. Just doing it your best possible effort and saying the work got done. Now, Vivekananda says it so beautifully. He says, God who created the cow, God who created the calf, also created the cow to give it milk. So it's not about you who's saying that I did this myself. God knows how to take care. You are just incidentally the instrument God has put in the right place to do this for you, for him. If you do it with that attitude, with the attitude of beyond me, in spite of me, despite me, with no identity of I or me, that is going beyond the self. What I'm saying is not easy. In today's competitive world, personal recognition matters. Personal achievement matters. I did it is a statement you have to say. You have to prove to your manager I did it. You have to be noticed by your company management. You have to get yourself in the books of the right people. But all that is not real recognition. Recognition is not by the externalities of what the mind creates about yourself being celebrated. It is about, like I explained earlier, completely dissolving yourself despite these external pressures. And when you're surprised, when you actually live such a life, you will be noticed. When you live such a life, you will be regarded as an achiever. And when you live such a life, that is when you discover the real reason for existence, the real joy that you can get. Like that Appaji Sahib's joy in seeing children coming to school, not his own children, children of his village studying in his school. Or the joy that the taxi driver discovered, not by earning money for his family, but by shifting this old woman and her dead son to their village. The joy he got by giving of himself for that activity. But that is what is going beyond ourselves. And I hope that each one of you, in your own ways, wherever you are, there are hundreds of opportunities for us. You can find opportunities for physical service. You can find opportunities for intellectual service. And by doing this in a manner that I described, you will give yourself opportunities of spiritual service to yourself. And that is what true life is all about. But begin to live from today. For a long time, you think you have been living, but that is not life at all. This is the life that you should all decide to do it from today. I'm sure many of you, especially in an organization which is very keen to listen to such things, itself is a beginning of change for all of you. And I'm sure that with that kind of an attitude, you'll actually be surprised that your work performance will go up, your personal relationships will become better, your family relationships will extraordinarily improve, and life itself, in a sense, will be much, much better. By bringing divinity in your life, you'll actually spread divinity around you. And to me, that itself is going far beyond yourself. I'm going to stop here. I know I've taken a little more time than I planned. In the next 10-15 minutes, I'd be happy to engage in any kind of questions any of you might have that you would like to ask me. Thank you again for the extraordinary opportunity of sharing these thoughts with you. And any questions that you have, I'll be happy the moderators can present it to me. I'll be happy to share.
Absolutely, sir. That was very, very thought-provoking. In fact, a lot of questions are coming in related to that. I would take one by one and probably wrote those questions to you so that you could help us answer those. One of the senders says that, when we think beyond ourselves and think to help people for their betterment, we tend to get fooled or cheated by people around. So how do we address the situation?
Your job is to just give. Your job is not to ask yourself what happens because I give. We always start imagining that giving has to be, people I'm giving help to should actually benefit from my help. Why do you care? Your job is to give and give yourself completely to that. And that is where the Bhagavad Gita is such a great blessing. The moment you seek that the other man should benefit from your help, other man should improve, that's also transactional, right? That's also conditional. Your help becomes conditional. That is why I use the word serve and not help. Help is conditional. But serve is just serving the divinity of the other person. And you don't expect anything to happen. I'll give a small example. Many of you might have dogs and pets in your house. When you pet your dog, what kind of feeling you get? Nice, fun. You feel very nice and warm and fuzzy inside. Now, dog comes wagging its tail. How many of us actually pet a dog thinking the dog will also feel happy and come wagging its tail to me? We feel nice, but most of us actually do it without even stopping to ask, am I getting any happiness by doing it? It just feels nice. So treat any extension of giving to others like that. The moment you say, by giving this, that person should improve. By my giving it, he should use it properly. We have lost it. We have made it conditional. To me, it's very simple. Don't worry about whether they abuse it, misuse it, throw it away. It is normal to feel that way. I have felt that way. Once I was traveling to Bangalore, in a signal light, a woman with a small baby came to me begging for some money. And I had just read a few days earlier an article in Times of India which said people actually can rent children in slums at 30-40 rupees a day, and they would give it cough syrup the whole day, because cough syrup has got 5-6% alcohol. The child would sleep all the time, or antihistamine and alcohol, it will sleep, and then they keep begging. That's why most children, if you see a signal like the child is always sleeping. Most of the time, child may not belong to this mother. And we would think, why should I give the thought came to me, why should I give money? This child might be somebody's child and she's just making money out of this child. Then suddenly it hit me. What does it matter? My duty is to just give help and stop there. And not worry about whether the child was rented, whether the child will get the food, whether he'll go to school. Now, that is not a giving. It is an expectation by giving. So my answer may not satisfy you. I'm not saying be Mother Teresa and just keep giving. Don't worry about development. But in the construct in which the context and construct of this example, learning to just give without any expectation in return, see that as an opportunity. Can you convince yourself to give without any expectation? And that is the exercise for you. That is the world is a gymnasium. World is a gymnasium where you practice and become perfect. See that as an opportunity to elevate yourself and move towards the perfection of spiritual growth. I see it that way, and it's a great way of looking at life.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. There's another question where, I think most of us are facing this probably. Even if we have the will and want to support others, we are so consumed or complacent with our day-to-day life. It is difficult to come out and go beyond. Any suggestions on how do we break this?
That is the phase when you're so obsessed with yourself, and it's very difficult, especially if you've got into the monotony of falling in love with yourself. I'm not saying you should not love yourself, but the first step I would suggest is take small steps. When you go towards your office every day, or when you're traveling by your car, or when you come back home, the whole week, I usually tell people to keep a small notebook. Just don't do anything. Just record how many opportunities you had to give of yourself to some activity which had no benefit to you directly. Just record. Don't do anything else. Simple thing. As I was walking down the street, I saw a piece of paper on the roadside. I took it and put it into the dustbin. As I was walking to the bus stand, I saw a child crying by the roadside. I just stopped to ask, child, why are you crying? There's nothing else. Just ask. If you start recording, you'll be surprised. You'll actually find, people have told me this. They suddenly start recording. In the initial days, they'll hardly find anything because your mind is not sensitive to pick it up. It's a training. First day, you will see 3 things or 2 things. Second, and half of it will be your own family members. Not that you shouldn't think about them. A few days later, you'll start seeing 7, 8 things. A week later, you'll start seeing 10 things. Then you'll notice most of them are not even known to you. You have no reason to even be part of their lives, but there's something you can do about it. After doing this for 15, 20 days, take 1 or 2 out of that list the next day and say, what can I do about it? Just do it. And suddenly you'll realize it becomes a very powerful habit. After some time, without your own knowledge, you start living your life for others. But you have to begin somewhere. This is like any other, to pass an examination, you have to study. So to get out of this fatigue and complacency of life, you have to make the effort to lose your abdominal flab and make it 6-pack abs. You have to work at exercise. It doesn't happen on its own. Just dreaming about it will not happen. So from today, simply thinking I live my life for others will not change you. You have to start doing something. Simplest way is what I said. A small logbook. I used to keep a small notebook. Just making points. Today you can have it on your phone. You can do different ways. You can do a voice memo on your phone. There's so many ways you can capture it. But then going back and doing something about it after some time. Intent first, action next, and then it becomes part of your lifestyle.
Oh. Thank you, sir. There's another question. So, what is the genuine happiness these days? People seems to be happy with the materialistic word. So, what's your view on that, sir?
I think people happy with materialism should ask themselves a simple question. You buy yourself a new cell phone, you bring it home, and your child drops it into the bucket of water. How do you feel? Can you feel happy that your child is discovering whether something will float in water or sink in water? Or you feel upset that a 40,000 rupee cell phone was destroyed? So if the cell phone gives you more happiness than the innocent action of your child, that shows what is it that you value in life. So happiness is so relative. When you bought the phone, you were so happy. 15 minutes later, when a child drops it on the water, you became unhappy. Which means we think the cell phone gave me happiness. But in reality, it actually caused me unhappiness. So we don't understand this. So we attach all the emotions that comes out of everything in life to an object. We have objectified existence. Happiness doesn't stay in the cell phone. Happiness is inside me and how I react to everything on the outside world. So to me, first thing you've got to do is break this objectification. Break this attachment that I bought a new car, I felt happy. Car doesn't make you happy. The inside you felt happy. So that's why when the car gets damaged, you also feel unhappy because you're attaching it to the car. If you attach it to yourself, you know that it's only the car which got damaged. You don't have to feel unhappy. It is a process. It's evolution. It's not as easy as I say. It is a constant reminder. Every day being mindful and asking yourself, am I objectifying it or am I truly just using it as an instrument for convenience for my own life? But the inner joy is something deeper. And the more and more you start seeking that inner joy, the service of others, in your life to the higher pursuit, in your life seeking that divinity in everybody else, then you'll understand that happiness is not dependent on the objects around you, but is extremely driven by the real inside you, the real inside self. Then you feel truly happy.
Sure, sir. Sure. So there are a couple of questions on technology related aspect. I'll take one. So in the current situation where everything is going online and digital, any suggestions on how can we serve the society online?
It's a question which many of us grapple with. I'm sharing some thoughts with all of you. That's online, and I feel happy just being with all of you. So I'm not saying I know anything much. What little I know, I'm just sharing with all of you. That's online. Today we have tools where online is a very powerful tool for me, the way I see it. Hundreds and thousands of children today still don't have the benefit of this technology and advancement of technology. The children in slums who have no access to education. Can you think a few of you can come together, maybe gift a tab or two to a slum and 20 children come together, keep it in front of them. And you can teach from home simple mathematics, simple English, simple things which giving of yourself to the children in some ways. So you can actually discover many ways of doing it. We don't have to think that it has to be something extraordinary or something very far-fetched and something completely beyond ourselves. Simple things like that. Today, telemedicine. Several of us doctors during this COVID crisis, we did that. We just said, we're available. I had people teaching yoga through online. When people were depressed, they would do counseling online. A lot of people did counseling online during this 2-3 months when people are suffering from mental health issues. So it is how you find that area where you think you can give of yourself. You don't have to be physically there. You can find ways. In our own small ways, we have discovered. I run webinars, workshops, talks like this. I realized today, platform online actually has got a bigger audience. I have people from all over the world who attend sessions. Yesterday's session that some of you attended had people from all over the world. So I have that's how we understand and share this little bit of information with everybody. And I think each of us have to find that niche and find that expert area with which you can present online to other people who could benefit.
Thank you, sir. One more question relatively on that. So with this increased focus on capitalism, rich is becoming rich and poor is becoming poor. So on the other hand, we are also advancing very well on the technology aspect. Is there a way we can leverage technology to eliminate the gap between rich and the poor? Or rather,
it's a wonderful question. Maybe though it's slightly outside the context of what we spoke, but I can use the context of what we spoke for that. Inequities are spreading, enormous inequities. If you take India, 1% of Indians control 72% of India's wealth. Absolutely unbelievable. People who suffered the most the last 2 months are not you and me. We'll manage. Even if the lockdown will manage, and the 3 more months of lockdown will somehow manage. No salary will manage. But the fellow was earning a daily wage. He cannot manage. So that is the remaining 99% of this country. Around the world, you can put all the top billionaires of the world into one bus and they would control more than 50% of the world's total GDP itself. The inequities are extraordinary. So I think the challenge with human existence is we have built a model of capitalism which is unbelievably impossible now to regulate. We have built a model of consumeristic economies is destroying the earth. In my opinion, the COVID crisis is a wake-up call to show us that model is no longer valid. So to me, the only way to fight this whole idea is to shift the paradigm. I can share an article I wrote some time ago, a few weeks ago. I think Tech and Roll published it. I talk about a new model, a new paradigm, where we all enlightened people who have these questions, who are seeking the answers for this, decide to create a new paradigm where we move away from profit maximization, absolutely mindless profit maximization, towards benefit optimization. Every one of us has a role in society and there's a value we bring to existence, and compensation should be in proportion to the value we bring. The benefit should be in accordance to the value I bring to society or system. So if we move away from profit maximization to benefit optimization, if you and I create a new model of a for-benefit economy and not a for-profit economy, I think that is the only practical way in which inequities can be stemmed, inequities can be reduced, and everybody can have enough for the work he did. I'm not saying equitable is what I'm saying. For the work we each of us do in an equitable manner, we can take this earth forward. and the planet will survive. So I believe that quadruple P's I talk. We will address the problems of people. We'll definitely focus on profits also. We'll worry about the planet, and there will be finally peace both inside and outside of us. And that is what a for-benefit economy can create, and we need to move in that direction.
Interesting, sir. So we look forward to that article for sure.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you. There's another question. Basically, since these ideals and beliefs are not part of our education system, so how do we really inculcate such values in our children? Especially, most of us would have small children, and how do we really take them through these values?
Very simple question. Ask yourself, what are you doing and for your children to imitate you? All these questions cannot be taught over a textbook. There's a famous saying, values cannot be taught. They need to be caught. And they can be caught only from parents. If you were to step back and ask yourself, am I leading a life which is emulatable? Am I leading a life where my values would be imitated by my son or daughter or my children? And the moment you start asking yourself those questions, the moment you start that process of self-inquiry and start modulating your own life to make it emulatable by the next generation, and your children will learn. There is no other way. I think we conveniently blame schools and the education system without recognizing that we are the role models for our children, for the future itself. This generation is a role model for the future generation. If we celebrate, I'll give a small example and stop there. If you look at all our history, our Puranas, every generation celebrated a different concept. In the Ramayana, we celebrated, integrity, value for the word I give, and stuff like that. Mahabharata celebrated courage and valor, stuff like that. So every generation had some value that it celebrated. Our generation is celebrating money making. We celebrate, making money at any cost and every. I don't care about the cost. I just have to make money. Veerappan is also making money in the forest when he was a brigand, or Azim Premji or Narayan Murthy also made money. So when you are blindly in pursuit of wealth creation, what is lost? The casualty is values. And so what you expect the next generation to pick up values without recognizing that I have not really picked up any values or following any values in anything I am doing. Clock your life, log your life and find out what part of your life is spent as quality time with the next generation, giving them the values by living it yourself. And doing that is the only way to do it. There's no other shortcut. It's painful, it's long drawn. Children pick up values. The best part of the children's values are molded till the age of 14. Between 14 and 20 is when they're experimenting with new values and parental role modeling effect comes down. So I used to run a workshop called parenting. So if you really want to do a good job of parenting, live a value-based, role modelable life till the time your child is at least 14 years of age. Then you're taking care of the future. Between 14 and 20, continue to do what you're doing, but your children have got much more role models to look up to. And that's a careful age. After 20, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. If you really want to invest in the future, invest in the present on your children by giving quality time to them, by leading a life which is imitatable and value-based.
Sure, Doctor. Absolutely agree with you. So any closing thoughts before we end the session, Doctor?
It's a great pleasure. It's such extraordinary to even understand that people from the corporate sector, which are traditionally stereotyped to believing that you're only looking at profit maximization, actually care about society, are so socially conscious. So I think there is hope. There's hope for nations like us. There's hope for societies like us. There's such wonderful people who are concerned about their social responsibilities and obligations. More of you, the merrier and the better for this country. So I would like to thank you all for even considering a topic like this and inviting a person like me to share some of my thoughts with all of you. Continue to lead your lives, like I said, worthy of emulation, and a life only for others. That will make living worth it. Thank you all so much. Such a pleasure having me.